Thanks for tuning into the For Love of the Game podcast, where we uncover the most cherished stories of America's favorite pastime. Woven into the DNA of our country are tales from our backyards and sandlots, summer leagues to the big leagues. Every fan has a personal connection, a memory, resonating in each of us. It takes us on a journey to a time long forgotten, or a moment in our youth. That first time we heard the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, the smell of the fresh cut grass. And these cherished recollections sit there in the back of our minds, beckoning us back to the game that we know and love, our reason to come back home, a reason for our love of the game. Joining the podcast today is longtime Seattle Mariners fan, Mr. Bill Knudsen. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. It's great to be here.
So, Bill, you've been involved with the game and around the game for quite some time, but I'm curious, where did it all start for you? Who introduced you to baseball?
Well, I had a wonderful stepdad who adopted me when I was 3 years old, and he was a huge baseball fan, played it in school, actually went through whole life with a crooked finger from being a catcher and caught one on the end of the finger. And so he had a crooked finger that gave him trouble socially sometimes when people didn't understand where it came from. But anyway, my dad was a huge fan, and when I grew up, we didn't have Major League Baseball in Seattle, of course. So we grew up as Seattle Rainier fans, which was a AAA club here in Seattle. It played at the Rainier Ballpark, sponsored by Rainier Beer. And so that ballpark was synonymous with baseball here in the Northwest up until '69 when the Seattle Pilots first came. So I went to that ballpark, Rainier Ballpark, with my parents for years and years and years and years, and that's where I learned the game.
Okay. And do you have any specific memories or from watching the Rainiers play that really stick out in your mind?
Well, two things that I was enamored with when I was a kid. One was there was a big hole in center field sponsored by Western Airlines. And if any player ever hit a home run through that hole, we all got a trip on a Western Airlines. And I was convinced as a kid that one of these days that ball was going to go through that little hole. I don't know how big it was, but it wasn't very big. And so I enjoyed going to games, telling my parents, this is the week we're going to win the trip to Disneyland on Western Airlines. Alas, it never happened. The other thing was kind of interesting. We have a very famous florist in Seattle named Charles O'Sullivan. And Sullivan Florist was around for, 40, 50 years. And in the old days, when a Rainier ball player would hit a home run, when they came around third base, they'd make a wide turn, swing by Mr. Sullivan's box, and he'd slip him a 20. So every minor league baseball player that was starving to death, eating in McDonald's 3 times a day, picked up a nice fresh 20 from Mr. Sullivan. So it was pretty funny to watch those players make a very wide turn at third. There was
awesome.
Also a great bank on the left field at Rainier Ballpark. And when I was in high school, we could sneak down there and occasionally would sneak an adult beverage out on the bank there. And you could sit on the bank and watch the game for free if you were willing to put up with the weather in Seattle. So we did that a lot on Friday nights, take a blanket and a date and maybe a Rainier beer and undercover and sit out there on the bank. And God, it was fabulous. And I've got some great memories out there.
Wow, that's awesome, and only in minor league baseball too. I mean, there's so many great little promotions like that, and then little spots like that can only be offered up by minor league baseball, I think. We mentioned Major League Baseball was slow to make its way to the Pacific Northwest. Did you follow any major league clubs growing up?
Well, when I was a teenager, it was during the Mickey Mantle what was his partner there that hit all the home runs?
Oh, Roger Maris.
Roger Maris, yeah, that was going on when I was in high school, and so obviously every kid in America was following that. My favorite player growing up was Ted Williams. The Rainiers were a affiliate of the Red Sox, and so we got a lot of hype in Seattle on the Red Sox, and I worship Ted Williams. I mean, I still think he's the greatest hitter I've ever seen. And I've seen Edgar Martinez and a couple of pretty good ones, but he was fabulous. So he was kind of my favorite.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that the kid was like you said, probably the greatest hitter to ever live. And, that was his one goal in life, to be proclaimed that. But he certainly lived up to those expectations. And I think one of the coolest baseball memories in general is the All-Star game at Fenway, one of Williams' last appearance there, and all the players were, walking around him. And I think that the story goes, I think he asked Mark McGwire if you can still, smell the ball when you just miss one and it comes off the bat, you still smell the bat burn or something like that. So it's just stories like that are just so cool.
I watched that. That made me cry to watch that. I mean, it was, talk about hero worship. Guys that, that we all worship now were in awe to meet Ted Williams. It was amazing. I mean, it made me tear up.
Yeah. And to just think about how much talent, but just knowledge of the game was in that circle. It just gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, I agree.
But I'm gonna jump forward a few years in your life here. And you were fortunate enough to work for the Seattle Mariners for about 7+ years or so.
Yes, sir.
How did you get your start with the team? How did you get your foot in the door?
Well, when the Mariners franchise was awarded to Seattle was 1976, and I was general sales manager of KBI Radio here in Seattle, and we were a station owned by Gene Autry, the famous cowboy. Gene owned a bunch of stations around the country, and anyway, we were lucky enough to get the broadcast rights to the Mariners, and so we were the ones that hired Dave Niehaus, who became a Hall of Famer, and so I was there at the birth of the franchise, running around selling advertising for the Mariners radio broadcasts. Sold the first package that was ever sold, which was Farmers Insurance Group and Budweiser and a few other people. And so had a lot of fun doing that, and got a chance to interface with the team, obviously, on a regular basis for a few years. Then I left and went to work for a competitor, another station in town. And while I was running that station, I got a call one day from a headhunter who said, well, I would like to have lunch with you. It turned out he was doing some headhunting for a VP marketing for the Mariners. And he said, I've been talking to people in Seattle for about a month. And he said, your name has come up at about 8 times. And he said, I have got to get in front of you and talk to you about Mariner baseball. And so anyway, I had a nice meeting with him. He asked me if I'd be interested in having lunch with Chuck Armstrong, the Mariner president, and George Argyris, the owner. And I said, of course I would. So as I walked out the door, my then wife said, don't do it, because she knew what the hours were like working in baseball. And so I said, okay, honey, I said, I'm just going to go have a nice dinner with these guys. Well, 3 hours later, I walked back in the door and my wife looked at me and went, uh-oh, you did it, didn't you? And I said, God. So my philosophy was, and my rationale to her was, there's 44 radio stations in Seattle. I run one of those stations. So I'm one of 44. But there's only going to be one Major League Baseball team within 1,000 miles of Seattle. And I have a chance to do what I think is some pretty creative stuff. And I've always been kind of a frustrated creative guy. And so I just said, this is a much bigger arena. Obviously, they paid me more money, which didn't hurt. But the main reason I took the job was a chance to have one of only 30 jobs like this in the country.
Yeah, and you mentioned the creative aspect. Just the promotional side of things and marketing in baseball really just flow so well together, and it opens itself up for so much opportunities for branding and sponsors. What were some of your responsibilities with the club?
Well, in those days, Mr. Argyris was, how do I say this delicately, a frugal owner. And so he wasn't exactly, he was throwing, quarters around like manhole covers. And so we didn't have a huge staff. So my title was Vice President, Marketing and Sales. And so I was in charge of the radio and television network, all the giveaways, season tickets, group tickets, game day tickets. And I had PR under my position as well. So basically I was in charge of bringing revenue into the club so that the baseball people could spend it. And I'm basically a sales and marketing guy. So I love that opportunity. And I can tell you that, when you're selling a radio station, you talk to media buyers and you talk to advertising agencies, and you get beat up with cost per thousand and all these, terminology. But when you're the VP marketing of a baseball team, you can pick up the phone and you can call George Warehouser, and you can call, the chairman of the board of the Boeing company, and you can call Bill Gates, because you work for a baseball team. And so I love that part of the job where I could actually pick up. I didn't have to talk to somebody who couldn't make the decision. I got to talk to somebody at the top of the tier who could make, big decisions on the spot. And so that part of the job was really lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you mentioned just the long hours, but you get to do a lot of things. And just from my experience in working in minor league baseball, you do wear a lot of hats, but it's awesome. It's such a great learning experience too. And you get to do so many things that really just set you up for success. And you really get to utilize every creative aspect that you have.
The other thing, Jim, I would say is that baseball teams and particularly marketing is the ability to do things in your community. A baseball team, a football team, basketball team, whatever, gives you an opportunity to do some magnificent things because of the reach you have. So for instance, one time the food bank people called and said, we're in desperate shape. We're way behind on food for the food bank for Christmas. And is there anything you guys could do to help us? And I said, well, sure. And so I've got a radio network, I got a television network, I've got signage at the stadium, I've got programs. And so I was able to go on the air and say, hey, if you're coming to the Yankee Mariner game this Saturday night, bring a can of food. We'd love it. And we filled 2.5 semis full of food. I mean, we had 38,000 people there that Saturday night. Everybody brought food. We filled 2 semis, which was beyond the wildest dreams of the food bank people. But the ability to do those kind of things for your community was a blessing. And I was the only Seattle homegrown guy in our front office. And so I really focused on that, much to the chagrin of my California owner. But I was always cognizant of the fact that I had this big, voice to share with with my community.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And what a thrill it must have been for the food bank too, when they received those truckloads. Holy cow. And what a difference that probably made. And it's so cool to see these teams and so involved with their communities. And one of my favorite ones that we got to do. So I worked for the Yankees AAA team in Scranton Wilkes-Barre there, the Rail Riders, and we had a teddy bear toss. So similar concept, and the fans were encouraged to bring a teddy bear, and we donated to the local children's hospital and the Ronald McDonald House. And so it was quite the sight to see teddy bears being tossed on the field from every direction. But just to know that you had an impact on a child's life just by giving them a teddy bear and putting a smile on their face, it certainly means the world. And in terms of promotions, I'm sure you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. So do you have any others that might pop in your head that were, some of your favorites, or some that you certainly want to forget?
Well, okay, we'll start with the ugly. I remember in 1984, one of our clients, Washington Natural Gas, sponsored Seat Cushion Night. And we were playing the Red Sox this Saturday night. And so we had these lovely seat cushions, real nice ones. And I paid quite a bit for them. We gave away 20,000 of them. At the end of the first inning, it was Red Sox 13, Mariners 0. And about 10,000 of those seat cushions came flying back in like Frisbees on the field. And so it took the staff, we had to delay the ball game for about 20 minutes while the staff and all of us executives were running around the field like idiots, picking up 10,000 seat cushions that came flying back at us. So Sunday we had bonus seat cushion day where we gave away the same 10,000. I got double dipped on those seat cushions. But anyway, it was I'm glad we never did one of those record blow up deals like the White Sox, because it was enough of a mess to have those seat cushions. We also had one night where it's one of my favorite stories. I got a call about 7:30 we're playing the Texas Rangers. I get a call from some guy who said he's in the Secret Service, and Vice President Bush was giving a speech at the Washington Plaza Hotel, and was all done and wanted to come down and watch a couple innings of the ball game. So I said, well, obviously, of course, bring him down. And so he came down, and all of a sudden I had dogs sniffing around the owner's box, and I had guys with lumpy suits, walking around that never smiled. And about the fourth inning, in comes Vice President Bush, who's an absolutely wonderful guy. And I introduced myself, and he leans in and he says, Bill, he says, my wife won't let me eat onions. He said, could I have a hot dog with onions and all the stuff on it and a Budweiser? And I said, yes, sir, Mr. Vice President. So I went over and I filled up a hot dog and loaded it up with stuff and got him a nice cold beer and brought it back to him. And he was just having the time of his life. And in those days, we had a big pirate ship in center field and a big cannon on it. And whenever we would hit a home run, they would shoot the cannon. It became kind of a Seattle tradition. So the vice president's eating his hot dog with mustard and relish and stuff on it and drinking his beer. Edgar Martinez hits a line drive home run just inside the right field pole, and they shoot the cannon. And the next thing you know, you've got 4 Secret Service guys diving on top of Vice President Bush. He's got mustard all over his tie and half his face. The beer goes flying all over the wall. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how much trouble could it have been to say, by the way, we shoot a cannon off here once in a while. But those Secret Service guys were amazing. They were on him like in a second. But God, I was just mortified that the vice president was on the floor.
Oh my goodness. I can only imagine the thoughts going through your head at that moment. That's a tremendous story. And it's funny, you often see the inner kid come out of people at baseball games. And that's so cool. All he wanted was a hot dog with onions. That's awesome. Well,
and one time I had a client that wanted to meet George Brett, and so I called George in Kansas City and was talking to him, and I said, George, I said, I don't expect you to do this for nothing. I said, if you want me to pay you or you want me to give some money to a charity or something, I don't expect you to be visiting with my clients in Seattle, without some sort of payback. And he said, you know what you can do for me, Bill? Again, Brett was really funny guy. I mean, really funny. And he's my favorite all-time player and one of the greatest hitters that ever lived. But anyway, he said, you know what you can do for me? He says, I've always wanted to meet Morgana, the kissing bandit. I don't know if you remember Morgana or not, but I mean, most baseball fans know who Morgana was. She had a chest the size of soccer balls. So anyway, I tracked Morgana down, and she was in LA, and I told Morgana that George Brett wanted to meet her. And of course, she always wanted to be on camera, And so I said, if I bought you a plane ticket and gave you $1,000, would you come to Seattle and lay a big wet one on George Brett? So she said, absolutely. So Saturday night, we're in the middle of the game. We're in the 7th inning stretch. We're taking a little break. And we always play Louie Louie in Seattle, in the 7th inning. Anyway, in the middle of Louie Louie, all of a sudden over the bank from third base comes Morgana. And of course, she's running one direction. And unfortunately, her breasts tend to go the other direction. But anyway, she made a roar out to second base. George turns around, can't believe that I've actually pulled this off. And she laid a great big wet one on George. I mean, it was the longest kiss on record. It was the funniest thing you ever saw. And of course, the fans went crazy. And then the next day, my boss said, where'd she come from? Who let her on? I never had the heart to tell my boss that I'm the one who did it. And I used our money to pay her. But anyway, I love Morgana coming out there.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a Hall of Fame story right there. I mean,
and then there was one other thing that was kind of fun. Alaska Airlines, as you might expect, has always been a great sponsor for the Mariners. And they had a big corporate picnic out at a beautiful lake just east of Seattle, Lake Sammamish. And so they asked if I could get a couple players or somebody to come out to their corporate picnic and sign autographs. And I said, sure. So it was, as a matter of fact, it had to be 1989 because it was, I took Griffey with me. He was a rookie, and I took Ken Griffey with me, and I took Jim Lefevre. And so we went out to the park, and there was about 1,000 employees out there all having a great day. And so anyway, long story short, I set up tables. I've got pictures for autographs and stuff. I've got, pens and pencils, and I'm all organized and buttoned down. And so I got on the microphone and said, okay, if you'd like to have Ken Griffey Jr. or Jimmy Lefevre's autograph, come on down. And next thing you know, I had 363 people in line for Griffey and nobody for Lefevre. I went to Jimmy and I said, Jimmy, I am so sorry. I'm just mortified. He says, hey, don't worry about it. He said, if I had my choice, I'd be in the Griffey line too. But I thought, oh my God. So I had to go around to a whole bunch of people and say, please, 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 would you go get an autograph from Jim Lefevre? I felt so bad. But anyway, a few people got in line and a couple of the Corp people got wind of what was going on. And so next thing you know, it was 365 in one line and 10 in the other. But at least we kept Lefevre busy for his hour.
That's funny. And then speaking of Griffey too, so we had Lou Piniella come for a get together for a few of our sponsors, just talking about some of his experiences, and he brought up the story of him and Junior had a bet, I think.
The spring training bet.
Yep, and then where Junior ended up bringing the cow in the clubhouse. 2,000
pound steer taking a dump all over Lou's office in spring training. It's absolutely true story. Yeah,
that's awesome.
He was Griffey was going on and on about how he was going to hit home runs in this spring training game, and Lou said, it's great, anybody can home run, but can you bunt? Can you get a bunt down? And so they made this bet, it was going to be the best stake in Arizona. And so anyway, Griffey tried 4 times to get a bunt down, didn't get one down the whole game, so lost the bet. So the next morning, Lou comes wandering in, opens the door in his office, and here's this smelly, this giant animal taking a big dump all over his oriental carpet.
That's awesome.
It was really funny. How in the hell? I'd love to know the story sometime of how they got that steer, where they got it and how they got it and what truck they put it in and how they. That's got to be a hell of a story all by itself.
I know. Yeah, we gotta track that one down. That's probably a hilarious anecdote in there. But so you got to spend, like I said, 7+ years there. And are there any specific moments that you remember when you were able to watch the game that really just kind of have stuck with you throughout your life?
Well, the Griffey highlight film would go on forever, but watching that kid who was absolutely fearless climb the wall like Spider-Man and make those throws from deep center, never even touching the ground, belt high to a catcher. All that stuff I'll remember that forever. Jay Buhner jumping over the fence in Fenway, and disappearing on the other side and then coming up with that ball in his mitt was pretty amazing. Everybody in Seattle, of course, is enamored with Edgar's, hit down the line and Griffey scoring and that pig pile and that beautiful smile underneath that pig pile. All that stuff is really special. The other thing that I always remember is that for some reason or rather, Chuck Armstrong, our president, and still a dear friend of mine, we used to walk the ballpark every night, kind of anonymously for a while. Ultimately, people figured out who we were, and so it was a little harder. But we used to walk the parking lot before and after the game and listen to conversations and listen to what people had to say about the food, about the service, about the ticket prices, etc. And very, very inexpensive focus groups that we learned a lot from, and falling in love with seeing a grandfather and his son and his grandson used to make us tear up every time we'd see, the 3 generations, walking around the ballpark. And so all those kind of special things and little kids and, just, I love that part of the game. And frankly, Major League Baseball has got to do a better job with kids. They are in big trouble with kids. Go to a ball game, you don't see too many kids, and we need more kids, and matter of fact, I did something that I'm probably the most proud thing I did as a Mariner executive. I had a meeting one time with a guy named T. Wilson, who was the chairman of the board of the Boeing Company. And he only had 8 season tickets for 80,000 employees. And that was unacceptable to the old ticket salesman, me. And so I called him up. He answered his own phone, shockingly, no secretary. And I asked for an opportunity to see him. He said, yes, sir. And he said, come on down. Well, I'll serve you breakfast. So Chuck and I are sitting in the lunchroom at the Boeing company. And so we give him a pitch on why he needed 322 season tickets, which was about a $250,000 deal. But I took each of the divisions of the Boeing company, assigned 4 tickets to each division, and it worked out to 322. So anyway, he and a guy named Stan Little, who was his fraternity brother and dear associate at the Boeing company, they looked at each other and literally in 30 minutes, they said, okay. And then we made the sales call in December, and baseball is a little short on revenue in December. And so Chuck said, Mr. Wilson, would you consider, a partial payment in December? Baseball has a little trouble generating revenue. And he said, that's no problem. So the next thing you know, we've got a check for $226,000 laying on the table, all in one sales call. I'm like, oh my God. And Chuck is looking at me like I'm the greatest salesman since Lee Iacocca, right? So we get all done. And so Mr. Wilson says to me, what else, Bill? What else should we do? And I said, I have a dream, Mr. Wilson, I've had for a long, long time. And he said, well, tell me about it. And I said, well, every time I drive by a soccer field and see kids playing soccer, I know that's a wonderful thing, but it drives me crazy. I want to see kids playing baseball. And I said, I think there's a shortage of baseball fields, quality baseball fields in the state of Washington. And I would like to build what I would call junior Mariner athletic fields. And I'd like to build one every year. And I'd like to do it in partnership with a community. And I'd like to tie it into ticket sales where that community has to come and buy, have a group night at the ballpark. So I could justify it to my owner that we sold some tickets. But I said, I really would like to do this. And he said, what's that going to cost? And I said, the community should put up the land. The community should obviously take care of the field because I'm not going to go out there and mow the grass every Friday. But I said, he called my bluff, and I'm scrambling like mad trying to figure out, what's the number? So I said, well, we got to buy stands, we got to buy fencing, we got to buy grass, we got to buy fertilizer, we got to, I said, I could probably get Pepsi to pay for the scoreboard. So I just pulled a number out of my backside, and I said, I think, if the community was with us, $75,000 to $100,000 a year would probably build a pretty darn nice field if we didn't have to pay for the real estate. So he looks at his friend Stan Little and he says, what do you think? Stan shakes his head, yes. And he says, how many years you want to do it? I said, well, we could do it for 10 and see how it goes. He says, okay. And so the next thing you know, he gives me $1 million to build Little League fields. I mean, I was over the moon. Chuck looked at me like, oh my God, And so we walked out of there with $1,236,000, and they bought breakfast. So those kind of things that you can accomplish, with a major league sports team are really, really special. And we built all 10 fields. And then when I left the Mariners, I got canned by Jeff Smullian when he bought the ball club in 90. He fired about 60 of us and wiped out the entire management structure. And so my boss and most of the vice presidents and stuff, we all got nuked in one day. But anyway, they didn't have the enthusiasm for that project I did. Nobody went out to re-up Boeing. And so it kind of fell apart after 10 years. But nevertheless, you can still go to Carnation, you can go to Ballard, you can go to several communities here in the Northwest, and you'll see a junior Mariner athletic field that we built with Boeing's money, thanks to that breakfast.
Wow. That's awesome. And just think about how many, probably in the thousands of kids that have memories at those ball fields now that you guys.
That was the dream, Jim. I mean, that was the dream. These kids, I mean, I went back and told George Argyris, our owner, about it, and he was not as enthusiastic as I was because, obviously it didn't generate a ton of money for the group. But I said, George, we're going to raise tens of thousands of Mariner fans. They're going to get pocket schedules at every game. They're going to have a great big sign that says Mariners. We're going to have Mariners show up at, opening day of Little League field, and it's going to be great, but it's going to be long-term great. And in fact, it's become just that. But I wish we were still building them because I'd love to see another 10 of them get built.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So even after your career with the M's, you stayed close to the sport. You now, about, was it 12 years ago or so, you started with your biweekly baseball newsletter. So what made you start that?
I was retired and got a call from a dear friend who used to work for me, who had taken over the CBS television station here in Seattle, and they were broadcasting 35 Mariner games. The rest of the games were on cable, and they were losing a lot of money on those games because their sales staff didn't understand how to sell sports. So she asked me if I would come out of retirement for a year, become the director of sports sales, and help the sales staff learn how to sell sports. They could sell spot television well, but selling sports is a whole different animal. So I decided to do it for her because I love her to death. And so I did this. So every Friday I would start a little newsletter to the sales staff of 8 people. And then on Monday, I would query them on what was in the newsletter in the sales meeting and kind of give them a little mini test, because I wanted to teach them, about red dot sliders and infield fly rules and to get them knowledgeable about the game. So when I left a year later, I just stayed a year. That was what my contract was. When I left, they panicked and said, "Oh my God, Bill, you got to keep the newsletter going. You got to keep the newsletter going." And so I said, "Okay, well, I'll do it for a while. Since I'm retired, I've got time, and it'll kind of keep me in the game." And so I started to diversify the newsletter to be a little more newsy. Here we are 12 years later. I started out with 8 readers, and right now I think I'm around 7,000.
Wow, that's tremendous. And I mean, what has that process been like for you? I mean, have you made any new connections from that? Do you have any fun stories from doing that the past 12 years?
Well, I've got readers all over the world. It turns out, apparently, it's amazing what happens when you put something on the internet. One of the guys, it's kind of interesting. One of the guys that is a reader of mine is in the CIA and travels the world on behalf of the CIA. And I get these weird emails from him in Afghanistan. And then lately I've been getting these weird emails from him, and he's in Cartagena, South America. And so I'm getting these people responding to emails in my newsletter from all over the world. It's fascinating. Sometimes I have to get a friend to come in and help me understand the language, because I'm getting emails from people that don't even speak English that somehow or other are reading my newsletter. So that's been a lot of fun. And it's interesting, one guy will share it with a buddy, and his buddy will share it with a neighbor, and the neighbor will share it with his company. And all of a sudden, you've got entire corporations where this newsletter is bouncing around. Like my son works for Costco, and he's got a whole bunch of friends at Costco. He's in corporate that read my newsletter, at Costco. So I get incredible responses, and every once in a while, I'll write some special article or have some special thing, and gosh, I'll get 200-300, emails. All of a sudden, I'll open up my computer and it lights up like a Christmas tree. And obviously, I know I've struck a responsive chord on that particular day. So I do it because it's fun. I do it because it keeps me in the game. I still am learning every day, and I love that. And I spend a couple 3 hours a day that I've got the time. And boy, but when I go on vacation, I get nasty grams. Where's my newsletter? Where's my, I went to spring training last year for 3 weeks, and boy, I got ripped when I got back.
That's awesome. Well, I can see why you get the responses you do. I just read the other day the 10 reasons why you should love baseball. And one of them that I really like, number 8, you put the box score, and I'll just read a little excerpt from it. You said, "My beloved stepdad, Bob Knudsen, used to refer to an accordion as an orchestra in a box. That's how I view the daily box score, the symphony of the game recorded in space, 1 column wide by 4 inches deep." And it just struck a chord with me because, how often you stop and think about it, but that box score tells a whole complete story, and it's just numbers in there. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But where can folks?
I can tell you, Jim, the most fun I have in my life right now is to go to a baseball game with my 2 14-year-old grandsons. And I taught them how to keep score when they were 5 years old. And so we all get a scorecard, and we all got our own Mariner pens, and we sit there and keep score and then compare. And obviously everybody, when you keep score on a scorecard, everybody has their own style and their own little nuances and stuff. but it's so fun to keep score of a baseball game with the kids and do all that box score stuff. And then we get all, we get home, compare it, and hang on to them. And the boys have hung on to their scorecards, from every game. They can tell you, pretty much every stat for any game they've ever been to.
That's awesome. And when you talk about, getting the attention of the kids too, then that's such a great way to start them early. And so they can start learning the game and developing that love for the game. Where can folks go if they wanted to sign up to be a part of that newsletter and receive those?
They can just send me an email at bill@billknudsen.com and I'll add them to the list. It would be no problem at all.
Awesome. So I would like to back up just a bit. So you were a founding member of the Fred Hutchinson Award, which is given to an MLB player who best exemplifies the fighting spirit and competitive desire of Fred Hutchinson by persevering through adversity. Can you talk a little bit about your involvement in that and just kind of describe that process for me?
Well, that award in previous, it's been around for a long, long time, and it's evolved and changed its name a few times. I think there was an organization in Pittsburgh called the Dapper Dan Society, if I'm not mistaken, and they had that award, basically a community service award, for many, many years, and then they kind of let it lapse. And Randy Adamak, who is a longtime 40-year employee of the Mariners, I think Randy went to work for the Mariners back in '79. He is one of the most incredible people I've ever met in my lifetime. I was lucky to work with him for 7 years, and I'm privileged to call him a friend. But Randy got wind of it, and he decided it was something we should do in Seattle. And so we had a series of meetings and wanted to do something with Fred Hutch. And so we ended up putting that whole thing together and basically changed it a little bit, but kept the basic structure of it. And Jamie Moyer's wife, Karen, who was a very, very active gal and was the person who ran the Moyer Foundation, she was an incredible, lovely, lovely woman, smart as heck. And she and I and a group of people formed the first board. And so we started having the meetings and we started putting together what we wanted to do. And it kind of evolved into a major luncheon event at Safeco Field. We'd put plywood down on the floor so we didn't ruin the grass. We'd bring in major speakers and major, supporters and so on. And that then became the main focal point of it. And then, of course, the Mariners, with all their media exposure, can keep it going all year round. But that all started from Randy Adamak's desk. He's the one who deserves all the credit for it. And Karen and I and some other great people were on the board. And you 20 minutes and hearing about what that was all about. Any sponsor we ever wanted, we give them a tour of Fred Hutch, and they were in. I mean, I don't remember anybody ever saying no to me when you talk to them about the Fred Hutch. I mean, it's a big deal in Seattle.
Yeah. No,
it's such
a great honor and such a great organization. Now I'm gonna ask you a few tough questions, I guess. We'll see how we do here. Can you name your all-time Mariners starting lineup?
I can actually. I would say at first base, it's got to be either Alvin Davis or John Olerud. Alvin is kind of known as Mr. Mariner. He was kind of one of the first big stars of the franchise. He was Rookie of the Year, 79. I think it was 79. I think he and Mark Langston were co-Rookies of the Year. But I'd put Alvin Davis and John Olerud at first base. Second base, I mean, Robinson Cano, A-Rod, Omar Vizquel. Boy, that's a tough one. I mean, I loved all those guys. I guess you got to give it to A-Rod, just because of nobody's made more money in the game than that guy has. I think it's like $450 million. So I guess I got to give that to A-Rod. Third base, I guess Beltre. Edgar Martinez played third base and played it well, but he ended up being a DH and missed out on several years of playing. I guess Beltre would have to be my third baseman. Dan Wilson is my catcher, hands down. Edgar is obviously my DH. Outfield, obviously you've got to have Ichiro in right. While Buhner played right, I'd put him in left. And obviously Junior is your center fielder, hands down. I mean, end of that. That's a short conversation there. Although I got to say that we've had a couple of great center fielders. I mean, Hendu wasn't exactly chopped liver out there. You know, Dave Henderson, he did a great job. And Cameron, when Griffey left, Cameron came in and had to be one of the toughest jobs in the history of Mariner baseball. How the hell do you replace Ken Griffey Jr.? And the first night he was out there, he crawled that wall and did a Griffey, you know, catch, snow cone catch over the top of the wall. You know, that the fans stood and the fans fell in love with him first night he played. And so Mike did a great job. And he had one night when he had, not mistaken, 3, if not 4 home runs in one night. I mean, he had a huge night that was just unbelievable. So, you know, but you're not going to replace Griffey, but he did an awfully nice job. My starting 5 has got to be Randy Johnson, Felix Hernandez, Mark Langston, Freddie Garcia, and Jamie Moyer did some wonderful things for us. I mean, you know, his fastball was, you could read the writing on it when it came in. It wasn't exactly 100 miles an hour, but man, that guy could pitch. And he basically outthought the hitters, you know, and has a number of records. I couldn't recite them to you right now, but he holds a lot of Mariner records. And so Jamie Moyer, Freddie Garcia, Langston, Felix, and Randy Johnson, I think would probably be my my closer. Would be JJ Putz, did an awfully nice job for us. Norm Charlton did a great job for us in the, you know, in the early 2000s. We had that great run. Kazu Sasaki did an awfully nice job for us when he was here. And obviously our manager would be Lou. You know, we've had, I was checking the other day, we've had 17 managers in 43 years. So we've had, the lifespan of a manager in Seattle is not very good. But Lou had the job for 10 years and probably would still have it if he were still here. But, you know, obviously Lou was the favorite manager of the fans. And every time we lose a game, everybody, you know, Lou, come back. And Lou does some commercials for a senior facility here in Seattle and is still active on television. And I, you know, I wish he was running for governor because I can't stand our governor. Lou would make a great governor. But anyway, that's my picks.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty formidable lineup you got there. They might give that 2001 team a run for its money, I would say. But we'll go on with some rapid fire questions for you here. Let's see. All right. Favorite ballpark food?
At our ballpark?
Anywhere. You're going to any stadium, what do you got to have?
Well, I'm a pretty traditional guy. You know, a lot of the ballparks there's a lot of diversity nowadays, and you know the Mariners are serving fried grasshoppers. So I mean, you can have a cup full of fried grasshoppers in 3 different flavors: barbecue and something else and something else. It's unbelievable. It's a hot item, believe it or not. But you know, I'm a pretty traditional you know, hot dog guy. So you know, I don't have too much in the way of exotic. They do a really gorgeous, fabulous beef sandwich at the T-Mobile that's really pretty special. And you can have it either with beef or turkey. And so I'm a big hot turkey sandwich guy. So I always convert it into a hot turkey sandwich. But my food tastes are pretty basic.
Yeah. Well, what about what's your favorite place like to watch the game from?
Well, I actually watch it. There's a semi-private area called the Terrace Club at the T-Mobile or Safeco. It's a private area right above first base in the second deck. And so I sit in the front row looking right down on first base. If I look up, I see the entire skyline of Seattle and the sunsets and Puget Sound and the ferry boats. If I look to my left, I see first base. If I look to my right, I see right field and the scoreboard. And, you know, the scoreboard is a multi-million-dollar deal these days. And so my favorite place is probably there. although I have a nice affinity for my leather chair at home in front of the widescreen. You know, the bathrooms are nice and clean here. The beer is cold. The food's cheap. Parking is free. And if it's 13-0 Red Sox, I can turn over and watch Law and Order on about 30 channels.
That's right. Sometimes you can't beat that leather chair, man. And speaking of leather chairs and watching some movies, what's your favorite all-time baseball movie?
Well, I've been thinking about that lately. Somebody else asked me that question. I mean, I guess it has to be Field of Dreams, like everybody else. You know, I mean, I loved Bull Durham. I loved Moneyball. I like League of Their Own. I thought I learned a lot that I didn't know, even though I've been in baseball my whole life. I watched For the Love of the Game this morning with Costner with my breakfast, and even though that's a love story with a baseball background, I like that movie too. So most of my movie favorites tend to be more contemporary. I know there was some, Eight Men Out and a lot of the great older movies, but the movie that makes me cry is Field of Dreams. I mean, it just, how do you not love Field of Dreams when he goes out there and plays catch with his dad? I mean, I'm a basket case every time. I mean, and I've seen it, 10 times.
Yep, we know the ending, but it gets you every time. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. That's one of my all-time favorites.
Costner is an amazing athlete. I mean, that guy's the real deal. I mean, I've watched him throw. He can throw. It's not all special effects. I mean, that guy is a hell of an athlete.
Yeah, I think when they were filming the part at Fenway, he got to take BP on the field, and they say it was putting him off the monster. So that's pretty cool.
Just a quick side story, Jim. I was at spring training a few years ago, and I had a bunch of the CEOs. I used to take them down to the minor league field in the morning and let them take batting practice against the pitching coach. And so the pitching coach would throw beach balls up there so that the CEOs of these banks and stuff could get some wood on the ball and get a couple of hits and say that hey, they hit a big league pitching coach. And so it was always fun to bring them down, and they were just like kids in a candy store, to pick up a bat and and dig in. So anyway, we get all done doing that, and pitching coach says, "Bill, you want to take a couple hacks?" And I said, "God, I'd love to." So I'm the same way, I mean, I'm thrilled that I get to do it. So I put a little dirt on my hands and I dig in, and the next thing you know, the pitching coach walks off, and Mark Langston walks on the mound. Now all of a sudden, my whole life passes in front of me because I've just gone from my friendly pitching coach to a guy who throws 95 miles an hour and is 25 years old. Well, he threw a half a dozen pitches by me. I have no idea how fast they were going. They clearly were not anywhere near what a big league hitter sees. But I don't remember ever getting the bat off my shoulder. I mean, I don't think you could have put a postage stamp between the bat and my shoulder. I mean, all I saw was the wind up and a pop in the mitt. Scared the hell out of me. I thought to myself, oh my God, if you were standing up there and the previous guy had just hit a home run in a tough game, and the pitcher's throwing 100 miles an hour, I mean, talk about time to change your shorts.
Yeah, I'm a lefty, so I couldn't imagine facing Chapman from the left side coming in that slider of his. You don't know what's going to come. But yeah, I still say hitting a baseball is one of the hardest things in all of sports. I don't care what type of athlete you are. You put any NFL player, NBA player up there in the batter's box, they'll probably look silly. But
the Seattle Seahawks have got a pretty good quarterback who also plays baseball, and he has said that the toughest thing he's ever done in his life was trying to hit big league pitching with a round ball with a round bat coming at you at 95 miles an hour. I mean, he said he'd rather look at a couple of 300-pound linebackers trying to kill him than do that.
Yeah, and that says something. I don't know if I want to be in his position every Sunday, but this is kind of along the same lines. Who would you say is the greatest fictional baseball character for many of these movies or books or anything like that?
Got to be Crash, doesn't it?
Yeah, Crash Davis is. Bull Durham's up there too, and on my favorite list. But just when he, I mean, the back and forth between him and Nuke Lelouch on the mound, and he's just an iconic figure in baseball in general.
I've talked to a lot of general managers who've told me that is a very, very, that everything you saw in that movie it happens. I mean, all that crazy stuff, it really happens all the time.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes is when they have I don't know if Lelouch's dad is coming to the game and he's all nervous, and they have this huge mound visit, and all the position players start coming in, and the bench coach he's like, all right, what's going on out here? He's like, well, Hector has a hex on his glove. We need some live chicken, and Lelouch can't breathe through his eyeballs. It gets me every time. It just reminds me, some of the guys that I played with too, and just some of the fun teammates and fun stories, from growing up. But what about? I know you mentioned in Griffey, and just the youth and enthusiasm that he brought to the game. Who are some of the guys that you love watching today?
Oh, well, today, gosh, there's, our friend down there with the Angels, Mr. Michael, is kind of fun to watch. I mean, good grief. That little poop in Houston, I can't stand that little guy. He must be hitting 800 against the Mariners. His strike zone's about the size of a coffee cup. I don't know how the hell you'd strike the guy out, He drives me crazy. I mean, I can't stand him, but I'd love to have him on my team.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
God, he's amazing to watch. And I get a kick out of watching that big guy with the Yankees, who's 7'11" and 400 pounds or whatever the hell he is. My God, what a monster! At least he's got a strike zone that, I know he strikes out once in a while, and it's a pretty good sized strike zone. But he's an awful lot of fun to watch. But I like fast. I like the game played fast. I'm not a big fan of giant home runs, and I like little ball, which is where the Mariners are going, and I'm excited about that. I mean, I think they finished third this year in stolen bases, and they've got, the average age of the Mariners is 26 now. I think they're tied for the youngest team in baseball, and so they are stealing a lot of bases. The manager has basically given them all a green light and said, guys, if you think you can go, because he doesn't want to take that enthusiasm and excitement away from those young kids, that are coming up. And so it's really fun to watch small ball, and I am looking forward to seeing a lot of that over the next few years as these young kids mature and and become what we all hope some of them will become.
Yeah, no, it sounds like they got a bright future, and small ball and stealing bases, it's such a lost art too. I mean, when you got a tear on the base paths, that can totally ruin a pitcher's rhythm. And it's certainly nowadays definitely overlooked. But what would you say? I know they've had a few uniform changes throughout the years. What's been your favorite Mariners uniform and logo design?
Well, I helped design the first logo, which was the trident. We did that on a bar napkin at El Gacho restaurant in 1976. And I used to always I took some heat from my boss because the trident is pointed down. And in Greek mythology, if you point the trident down, all the good luck runs out. And so he said, why didn't you turn the trident up? And I said, well, I didn't turn the trident up because if you did that, it would look like a bad Husky logo. And I didn't want it to look like, the Washington Huskies. So anyway, that's probably my favorite just because I had a little small part in helping it. But I think the current Mariner uniform, the current Mariner logo is spectacular. I think their current logo, I mean, it doesn't have the history of a, Yankee logo or a Dodger logo or the Cubbies or whatever, but from a pure graphic standpoint, I think the Mariner trident right now, or the compass, is spectacular. And I think I sent you one the other day, but that is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful logo that I'm very, very enamored with. And I mean, I wouldn't change a thing in that for the next 20 years.
No, that's awesome. And it's definitely some very thoughtful and creative branding there. So rumor on the street has it that you like to play golf too. Who if you could choose 3 players in the history of baseball, players, coaches, personalities, and you get to go to any golf course in the world, what golf course you going to, and what 3 individuals are you bringing with you?
3 baseball players.
Yep.
Well, it's the best course I've ever played is Pebble Beach, so I've got to say Pebble. I've not had the pleasure of playing Augusta, and I played most of my golf on the West Coast. So there's some great golf courses on the East Coast that I would love to play someday, but I haven't gotten there yet. But how do you argue with Pebble Beach? I mean, it's just breathtaking. Every hole is breathtaking. The Marshall is always yelling at me because I'm always stopping and looking at the ocean or looking at whatever. And I've had some semi fist fights with Marshalls who tried to hurry me up, but at 6'8" and 300 pounds, they aren't able to do it physically. So that would be, the George Brett. I would love to play. I mean, the amount of stories that would come out of Brett's mouth in 4 hours would be worth the price of admission and the outrageous green fees at Pebble. So George would be 1. Who would be 2? Let me think. That's a damn good question. I loved Don Drysdale was Dave Niehouse's partner doing Angels baseball on KMPC when we hired Dave. And I liked Don. Don was a charming guy, and he's tall like me. I think Don was 6'5" or 6'6". I'm 6'8", but Don was a wonderful guy that I really wanted to get to know better. And he died way too soon. And so I guess I'd put Don in there. George would be in there, and probably Nolan Ryan. I'm a big Nolan Ryan fan. I used to watch him throw 150 pitches at the Kingdome, and then he'd go downstairs and work out for 2 hours. I mean, literally, before they turn the lights out in the visitors clubhouse, they'd have to kick Ryan out of the gym because he'd be down there riding the damn bike at 1 a.m. after he threw 150 pitches and he hadn't even showered yet. He'd go from the mound, in and get on the bike. And so that guy was a freak of nature, and there'll never be another Nolan Ryan. There'll never be another guy throw that many no-hitters. And I mean, he was, is something special. And I think he's kind of gotten screwed over a little bit in Texas. And I mean, if I had Nolan Ryan involved in my ownership group, he'd be there forever and he'd be out front forever. Yep. And, so I guess Nolan Ryan and Don Drysdale and those 3. And I'd love to play, I'd love to play Augusta sometime, although there's a couple holes there that look awfully narrow for my driver.
Yeah, I don't think I'd fare too well there with my slice, but that's a pretty good foursome right there.
Well, it'd be fun. I guarantee you the stories would be great.
I tell you what, I think Nolan would be doing squats in between every stroke there. But we'll finish up with we'll call it the extra innings question. You get to go back in time and cover any one season in baseball history. You get to travel with the team, go to every game. What season are you reliving, and what team are you following?
I guess it'd have to be the 1960 and the Yankees and the Maris and Mantle. I mean, I followed. I was a kid. I had one of the first transistor radios in our gang, and I listened to. I mean, I got kicked out of more classes in school for listening to those games on my little earphone. That had to be a historic, deal to follow. I think probably. That year would be my favorite year. By the way, I got to tell you, if I can take just a second, my all-time promotion I wanted to do that I never was able to do. I met the Weyerhaeuser family when I was with the Mariners, and they have millions of these little seedlings. They're, small. When Weyerhaeuser chops a tree down, they plant one also. So, they're constantly planting more trees. So anyway, my promotion was going to be, and it was all tongue in cheek, but it was going to be grow your own bat night. And I was going to give away 50,000 seedlings at a ball game so that everybody could go home and plant a tree and grow their own bat. And then George the Weyerhaeuser people said they'd give me 50,000 more trees that we could give jointly to the city of Seattle. And so we could plant trees all over the Pacific Northwest in the city, as well as give away 50,000 grow your own bats. And I thought that would be so fun. And I thought that the television spot could be a riot. We could really have some fun with that. And anyway, my owner didn't get my sense of humor and didn't get it. And I thought, we did Funny Nose Glasses night one time. It was one of the biggest promotions we've ever done. There's still people 30 years later wearing those funny nose glasses with the, you don't always have to give away a bat or a ball or a bobblehead, and I used to love to do that unexpected stuff that would really be fun. So grow your own bat night. Somebody sometime is going to do that, and it's going to be great.
I hope someone picks that up, and I hope they invite you to the game too, so you can be there. But Bill, this has been really fun, and I appreciate the folks at the Puget Sound Honor Flight for connecting us. That's a great organization as well. If you have a chance to check that out. But again, Bill, thank you so much for being on here.
Jim, it's my pleasure. Thank you. I've enjoyed it very, very much.
That wraps up today's conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please give our podcast a like and share it with your friends. And if you have a baseball-related story to tell that you would like to have featured on the show, drop us a line in the comments, or you can send a direct message to our Facebook page. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Jim Knudsen, and this is For Love of the Game.